Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to week 3 of BK 121. This week we are working on chiffon cake, Swiss and American buttercream, and buttercream flowers. It's going to be super fun. This is another one of those things. We talked a lot about week 1 about how cakes can make you money. Buttercream flowers and gum-based flowers can really add dollar signs to your product. So again, this is a really profitable skill. Something Clarissa had just brought up and I wanted to announce to everybody is about your externship papers. So I've gotten a lot of messages about it. You will not lose points in our class if you do not submit that externship paper on our class page. But it needs to be into your career services rep. So if you've been communicating with your rep and they know what your plan is, or maybe you turned in your paper before this class even started and they already have that paperwork, you don't have to submit on our class page, but you just have to make sure you're communicating with your career services rep so that by the time this class ends, you're ready to rock and roll, okay? So anybody worried about not putting it on our page, you don't need to be. It's just there as a strong reminder. Sound good? Okay. So the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is we have a discussion forum this week. Let's take a look at it together. Decoration techniques. This is a fun one though. You get to look up a YouTube video. What is a design technique that you saw for the first time? What appealed to you about the design? Is this something you think you can do or would require extensive practice? And then include a link to the YouTube video. So remember that discussion forum post, this might actually be different than you've experienced it before, but the way that I do discussion forum posts is your initial post where you have that YouTube video and you answer those questions is worth 8 points. And then you need to do 2 peer replies, each worth 1 point. So your initial post is worth 8 points and your 2 peer replies are both worth 1 point for a total of 10, okay? Now, I want to remind you too, when numbers are small like that, especially with your knowledge checks, it can be easy to say, 9 out of 10, close enough. But I want you guys to finish. Remember when there's a smaller amount, let's say a test has 50 questions and you get 10 wrong, but a test has 10 questions and you get 2 wrong, it's going to the grade will be drastically different. When there's less things you're being scored for, it's overall worth more. So don't forget, the reason I'm rambling about this especially is your knowledge checks, because you can take them over again until the deadline closes. You can take them as many times as you want. There is no shame in it. I currently am doing knowledge checks myself, and almost every time I have to do it 3 times before I get 10 out of 10. I get 9 out of 10 every time, and it drives me nuts because it's always one, like I know the question, I'll get stumped on one question, I'll submit, and then I'll see the 9 out of 10 and I go, I already know which question I got wrong. But it's a really good learning for me, and you know what, by the 3rd time I take that knowledge quiz, I know the correct answer to that question that I kept getting wrong. So just remember that that's available to you guys. It's a really amazing opportunity that we can retake them. That's not something that you can do everywhere in every education format. So yeah, just take advantage of that and get the highest grade that you can there. I want to remind you guys, I already mentioned it before I started recording, but this week we're making a full cake again, just like weeks 1 and 2. And then the next 3 weeks, or the next 2 weeks, we're prepping for our week 6 final. So in week 4, we're going to bake off the layers of our cake, and we're going to begin our gum paste flowers. In week 5, we're going to make our buttercreams, and we're going to complete our gum paste flowers. Then in week 6, you are going to stack your 2-tiered cake. It should be covered in fondant, and you're going to put your gum paste flowers on. So it is a really big project, but with time management, absolutely achievable since we've broken it up into those 3 weeks. So because next week we don't have too many new techniques that we're learning, I'm going to bring a Jeopardy game for us to play to review the techniques that we've learned the past couple of weeks. You guys are nearly done with your program, and so today I'm going to try hard to keep this more conversational. I don't just want to talk at you the whole time. I don't just want to play our class videos. You guys are all super strong students. You remind me of that every time I see your assignments. So I don't necessarily feel like I need to show you our videos that are on our class page in our class every time because you guys have access to those, but I have pulled up a few additional videos that I really like that are fun examples that I want to share with you guys. Before we move too far forward, I want to talk about last week briefly, and before anybody freaks out about the moose, I want to offer a bonus session for the moose on Friday. I had a lot of people a little panicky about the moose, which is totally understandable. I also think that there was a discrepancy between the video and the recipe. So I think that that maybe confused a few people. But so on Friday, if you guys want, I will hold a bonus session that can just be about that moose based on a pat bomb, and we can dive deeper into that. So now that that's out of the way, who wants to tell me about week 2? Experiences, good, bad, questions, anything.
So I ended up having to redo everything. And I ended up having to redo everything because when I was moving the cake to put the mousse in, I tore my sponge.
Oh no.
And then the sponge had the clumpy thing she said was fine, but it was a little too much. And then it wouldn't come out of the pan. So I tried to use a knife to pry it out.
I've been there. Somebody, I got a phone call over the weekend that had covered their cake with saran wrap, but the saran wrap was directly touching the mirror glaze. So when they took the saran wrap off, took the glaze right off. So you're not the only one that ran into some bumps, Clarissa.
I was like, you said it would be difficult to get the sponge out. So I was like, I know, I'll put parchment paper down first. But really, the moose kind of adhered the parchment paper to the sponge. It's a mess.
Jill says she got a lot of great advice from classmates on the Facebook page. That's awesome, you guys. I hope that's a really positive place. That's the thing I always say about social media. It's just, especially between classmates, I keep it positive and keep helping each other. I love that. Anybody else? Matthew? How was week 2?
It was good. It was fun. The mirror glaze was pretty awesome. Wife was excited when it came out.
Nice. That mirror glaze is cool, huh, you guys? It was one of those things, I think I said this last week in our live session, that I thought would be a trend. Like, there are so many things, especially in pastry, that pop up and are really cool for a year or so, and then they sort of fizzle out. But mirror glazes did not go away. They are here to stay. And they're pretty simple, too. You have to work quickly, of course, because they're temperature sensitive, but it's a really quick way to decorate a cake, right? Much quicker than last week trying to get our smooth coat of icing and our consistent shell border. So as far as speed goes, you know, if you had to make 5 of these, you could batch it out the same way, make a huge, all your layers, the next day make a huge batch of mousse, freeze all your cakes, and then just pour a big thing of glaze over it, and boom, you got 5 cakes done almost instantly. So yeah, mirror glaze, really cool, awesome, fast technique. Also, I think is a really beautiful finishing touch, particularly with a ganache glaze. So in BK201, you guys had to do your dessert trio. And we talked a lot about how like a piece of cake didn't really qualify as a composed dessert. But if you had a piece of cake with a layer of mousse in between and on top, or that's been coated in that mousse, and then you poured a ganache glaze over it, a tiny little petit four style of cake, that's beautiful. That's absolutely a composed dessert. So things like a glaze can really add a finishing touch not only to cakes, but to other desserts as well. So keep that in mind. A lot of the fancy desserts that I see that look like pieces of art that are like really, you know, small, intricate, colorful. It's hard to identify what everything on the plate is because it's been like so well crafted. A lot of that is done with glazes. Glazes pouring over something to give it that smooth, shiny finish. So yeah, keep practicing with those glazes, you guys. Don't hesitate to ask any questions about that at all. Does anybody else have anything about, what about taste? Did you guys enjoy eating your week 2 cake?
Question.
Yes.
Can you the mirror glaze without the gelatin. I am not a fan of the texture when you use the gelatin. It just makes things a funky texture, and it's yuck.
I would say not really, but you can do a ganache glaze or a white chocolate ganache glaze that doesn't require gelatin. So if you were to do white chocolate, you could, color smaller portions of it the same way you would with the mirror glaze. So that might be something you experiment with if you really don't like the gelatin texture, which I for sure get. I feel the same way about fondant, you guys. We're going to wrap our week 6 cake in fondant. I hate fondant. It's beautiful. I love sculpting. I love working with it. Like wrapping a cake, I am a decorator, so I really love working with it and using it on a cake. I hate eating it. When I have a customer bring me a picture of a fondant-covered cake, and that's what they're looking for, I tell them, I will absolutely do this, but it's more expensive, and it doesn't taste as good. So do you trust me to try this with just buttercream? And a lot of times they do, which I think helps soften the blow of the budget of whatever they're spending, because then it's not nearly as expensive. And I feel better knowing that someone doesn't have to peel something off my cake before they can eat it, you know? Some people love the taste of fondant, so that's, I definitely have met plenty of people who love the taste of fondant. Claire is just shaking her head no. But yeah, so that is something as we get closer into the fondant stuff that we'll talk about more, making sure that your customers know what it is, what it tastes like. I always bring a little piece of fondant to tastings so that they can try it with their piece of cake and see the texture, and usually they're like, maybe not, maybe I don't want this fondant. So let's see if I bet.
Chef, does it have to be fondant, or can we use modeling chocolate since it has about the same consistency and it's more edible?
You can use gum paste. I actually recommend 100% gum paste for your gum paste flowers. I would say you could use modeling chocolate for your flowers as well, but I definitely want you guys to use fondant at least this one time to cover your cakes in week 6, I know. But don't worry, you're gonna cover it with delicious frosting, so you can peel off that fondant in the end and it's still gonna be a delicious cake. Let's see here. Everyone and I didn't like the texture. Tried the mousse with gelatin and it wasn't a favorite either. That's totally understandable. You know, the other thing that I hear a lot, very similar to not liking the texture of gelatin, is a lot of people disliking like the creme brulee and the creme anglaise because they're really sensitive to the flavor of eggs. So some people, when they taste that vanilla souffle, all they taste is eggs. I'm not one of those people. I could eat 100 vanilla souffles at a sitting. I love them. But yeah, it's just, you guys will continue to run into that as chefs, is plenty of things you personally like, plenty of things you don't like at all. I have this book of interviews, and it's all pastry chefs. All the interviews are of a pastry chef. And one of the questions that they asked all of them is, what's one of your favorite desserts, or what does your family eat for dessert? And most of them wrote fruit. They were like, listen, I'm in that sugary kitchen all day long. We got sugar all the way around. I just don't crave it. I love making it still, passionate about it still, but I don't crave eating it anymore because I'm constantly trying things all day at work. So like more often than not, I'm just craving a fresh strawberry or fresh piece of fruit. So I thought that was really interesting, and I think that as you guys continue to grow in your skills, your taste will continue to change. I grew up in a really in a small area, and my dad retired when I was really young, and my mom had to go back to work, and my dad became the cook in the house. And he had never really cooked before. He's a smart guy though, so he got like 20 meals, and we would just eat those same 20 meals in rotation. And so there were so many things that I didn't try until I was out of my house, until I went to college, like sour cream, you guys. I do not think I tried sour cream until I was 21 years old. So yeah, and I love sour cream, can't get enough. I use it in all my baked goods now, not all, but a lot. So yeah, keep taking note of things that you like and don't like, but keep having an open mind as well as you continue to learn other applications for them. All right. Hey, nice. Matthew says that his daughter has a similar story in that He's learning to cook now so that he can do more than the 20 meals. I love that, Matthew. All right, you guys. Well, if you're ready to move on, are we ready? No other questions, comments? Ooh, Willie said he added coffee to his. Coffee and chocolate, you guys, are 2 peas in a pod. I use coffee in my chocolate cake a lot. It doesn't necessarily give the cake a huge coffee taste, but the flavors really enhance each other. So by adding some coffee, the bitterness of that coffee really caters well to the smooth, creamy chocolate, and it's just an explosion of wonderfulness. So that's something, if you guys really love chocolate, you can continue to experiment with coffee and chocolate.
Hey, Chef.
Yes, Willie.
Okay. No, what is I go to a Chinese restaurant here in town, and they have like these tiny chocolate like layer cakes with a little bit of gelatin on it, and the coffee just explodes throughout the chocolate cake, and it's so awesome.
Oh yeah, that sounds
so
delicious.
I wanted to just replicate that.
Ooh, Francis, first of all, Willie, I love that. I love that you found inspiration in a dish that you've tried before from somewhere else. I encourage you guys all to do that every week. Think about, where have I tried something like this before? What did I like about it? Is that something I can replicate? That's what your discussion forum's all about this week. So that's awesome, Willie. Francis wants to know if you guys had as many on-time submissions as last week. And the answer is no, we did not have quite as many as last week. But let me see here. Gotta get my camera fixed up. There we go. So we didn't have quite as good of on-time submissions as last week. We still had pretty good on-time submission. You guys also still have, you know, the late period tomorrow and Thursday through 11:59 p.m. CST. I think that this week people were a little bit more nervous about their final product, which I totally understand. I think all of us, one of the reasons we are drawn to pastry is because we're detail-oriented. I think that when we are working on something, all of us really look deeply into each step and put a lot of care and attention into it. So sometimes that can mean we're a little bit of a perfectionist. We can maybe be put a little too much pressure on ourselves to be perfect. I'm not expecting perfection from you guys. So for example, with the mousse this week, if you have chocolate flecks in your mousse, I'm not taking away any points for that. You still completed most of the technique. You've still got it wrapped around your cake. Some detail like that doesn't mean that you guys are going to lose points. The thing that I take off points for is when major parts of the technique are missing. So let's say in your mousse pictures, you didn't show me your whipped cream, or you didn't show me your eggs and chocolate mixed together. That would be something that we lost points for, because I need to see how that was done. But having a little bit of chocolate seized up in your mousse and having flecks, that's not something you're going to lose points for. If your glaze turned out to be maybe a little thin, that's not something you're going to lose points for. Okay, you guys, I promise that I don't look at your assignments and nitpick. What I am looking for is that you understand the technique. It's the first time for a lot of you doing some of these techniques, and I would never, ever, ever expect perfection out of you the first time. I've been working on cakes and my frostings and my mousse for almost 8 years, and I still mess up all the time. So when it comes to your assignments, if you're done on time and you're just feeling like, I just don't know about this cake, it's just not my strongest work, turn it in. I promise that I'm going to be kind, and that means that you get in another week to make adjustments. So if you really don't like your final result, then you get more time to try again and turn it in to update your grade even more so if you lost points. So that's my speech about that. Any questions? No, we got a quiet group today. Kathleen, you got your hand up. Go ahead. Maybe?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm on my cell phone.
No
I just want share with everybody with the phone call I called you about and lessons learned. Don't ever, 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 ever put saran wrap on your final product because it took it all off.
I warned them, Kathleen. I told them in the very beginning.
Oh, you did. I'm sorry I was late. And
No, it's okay. I didn't tell them it was you. I just warned them that it could happen.
Oh, it was me, everybody. And I took it to cars and everybody was like, well, what happened? I was like, well, I didn't know it stuck and it was too late. Once it stuck, I had to take it off because we had to eat it.
Oh, that's a hoot. So,
and I didn't send you the picture because I was going to load it up so you could see what it looked like afterwards. I just didn't send it yet. I'll do that today. And so you could just see, yeah, it was horrible. It just, like you said, did you get the pictures before you did it? I said, yes.
Yeah. And you guys, stuff like that'll happen too. The thing I do most and the thing that makes me the most money in my career is sugar cookies. I do really, really intricate decorated sugar cookies. And a lot of the time I will only make like one extra in case I mess up. And which you'd think I'd know better after 8 years to maybe make like a couple more extra. But I have been working on a cookie. And with royal icing, you can't just like pipe two colors right next to each other. They'll bleed into each other. So there's a lot of waiting, a lot of doing certain decorative work, waiting for it to dry, coming back and doing more decorative work, waiting for it to dry. So a single cookie can take 3 days between the waiting time in between. And I have definitely been on the final stages of a cookie, piping my like last detail work, maybe putting my little flake of gold leaf, and then dropped whatever tool I was using right in the middle of the cookie. Ugh, and I can't tell you how heartbreaking it is. And it's happened to me so many times that now I freak out much less. Now I'm like, okay, well, we got to figure it out. You got to move on, move forward. Can't dwell on it too much. Kathleen had a great attitude about her saran wrap. So yeah, I encourage you guys also to try and have that attitude when things go wrong is, laughing about it, learning from it, and pulling up the bootstraps and keeping going on. Yep, Shannon, you're totally right. She says that's the cookie you sacrifice for tasting. Yes, I've definitely eaten many broken cookies. The cookie makes you feel a little better as you're eating it. Then you don't have to look at the broken cookie anymore either. Okay, you guys. Well, let's jump into week 3. So we are working on chiffon method cake, Swiss buttercream, and American buttercream. American buttercream, super easy. It's the one that most of you are most familiar with. Maybe not even because like it's one that you eat most frequently, but it is the one that you see at grocery stores, and mass-produced cakes are definitely using American buttercream. There are different versions of American buttercream when it comes to the shortening and the butter. So Chef Jeannie, for example, likes to use 50% shortening and 50% butter in her American buttercream. I like to use 100% butter. Now, if you were one of those people when you made your Italian buttercream that you thought, man, this is too buttery, all I can taste is butter, I don't like it, then I suggest doing the half shortening, half butter in your American buttercream. But if you were one of those people that loved that rich buttery taste of the Italian buttercream, then I encourage using 100% butter in your American buttercream. Paula says, is the American buttercream we are using for our flowers? And the answer is yes. So the 2 buttercreams that we're making this week are Swiss and American. Swiss buttercream, similar production to Italian buttercream. We're making a Swiss meringue though. So that means combining your eggs and sugar over the heat, over a double boiler, whisking them to nearly ribbon stage, so pale in color, pillowy in consistency, making sure that your egg whites have been whipped to proper consistency, and then mixing the 2 together. Do we need to make full formula for the Swiss buttercream? It uses over 1,000 grams of butter. It seems like a lot. No, you do not need to use a full batch of the Swiss buttercream. You are using the Swiss buttercream to put the frosting between your layers and to coat your cake. So your crumb coat and your second coat should be Swiss buttercream. The reason being that it tastes better than American buttercream, but also because I want to make sure you guys get all 3 of those techniques before you finish this class and before next week. Italian buttercream, Swiss buttercream, American buttercream. Those are going to be the 3 you see in the industry over and over and over and over again. So yes, to Sissy's question, you can make a smaller batch of the Swiss buttercream. You can definitely make a smaller batch of the American buttercream. You don't need much. The American buttercream is going to be for our detail work. And it's something I want you guys to keep in mind as a tool for detail work in the future. I think some of you noticed with your Italian buttercream, when you were piping your shells, it felt almost too soft. Like your shells weren't as defined as maybe you wanted them to be because the icing was so smooth and free-flowing. American buttercream is much more stiff, and because of that, is much easier to have control over details like borders, flowers, and lettering. Paula said she made full batches already so that she can add, you can still add color to them. Yes, you can definitely add color to your buttercreams. Remember that buttercream can be stored pretty well, especially can be stored longer in the fridge. Something we all experienced with our Italian buttercream in the fridge is not letting it warm up enough after we took it out and before trying to refresh it. So make sure after you've chilled your buttercream in storage that not only are you re-whipping it, but that you're letting it come back up in temperature, that it's not too cold. Gregory says, how long will it keep? So Italian buttercream can keep for up to 5 days in an airtight container. I think even maybe a day or 2 longer in the fridge. And then I think, oh, did I freeze or can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, thumbs up.
I can hear you.
Swiss buttercream, very similar to Italian buttercream. I would say 5, pushing it 7 days if you're in the fridge. American buttercream doesn't have any eggs in it, so can be stored in the fridge for, I would say, a week and a half, probably even 2 weeks if it's in a really nice airtight container and you've scraped down the sides. Maybe you've got a layer of saran wrap over the top of it. So you definitely can store it for a while. And remember too that buttercream has other uses. So one example that I've given to several students this week, with your trimmings of your cake, whenever you level your cake out, I take those trimmings, I put them in a mixer with a little bit, like a small scoop of buttercream, and I mix it together, and that's what I roll my cake pops out of. So my cake pops aren't like fluffy sponge cake, they are dense baked cake that's rolled together with frosting. Then I freeze them before I dip them in chocolate, and I charge $2 a piece for them, and it was just scraps. It was just leftover frosting and leftover scraps from my cake that I had to make. So that's something too I love talking about with you guys, is waste management and how to waste as little as possible. Rebecca says we freeze it. What do you mean, your buttercream, your cake? I avoid the freezer when at all possible when it comes to buttercream, because buttercream sweats. So you know when you have a glass of ice water outside on a hot day, how the cup sweats and it gets wet? Buttercream tends to do the same thing when it's frozen, and then if you're in the kitchen still where it's pretty warm and you take that cake out, it's going to start to sweat, which could then make colors bleed and may change the consistency on the exterior. So I avoid using the freezer when possible. All right, let's start by looking at our chiffon method cake recipe. This is the one area that I think is a little bit trickier. I don't think you guys will have a problem with Swiss buttercream. I'm positive you guys will all be fine with American buttercream. But the chiffon cake is a little trickier than the past 2 styles of cake that we've done, the creaming method and 2-stage method. So preheat oven to 350. Now, remember, all ovens are different. I've had a lot of people say, Chef, I baked at exactly the temperature for the exact amount of time that the recipe said. The recipe's not in charge, you're in charge. So making sure that you're touching your cake, making sure it's feeling springy, that's an important part of chiffon, is making sure that it is firm enough. smelling your cake, looking to see if it's pulled away from the sides of the pan. Now that's something with this cake that will be different. The past 2 weeks, I've told you that when your cake starts to pull away from the edges, it's pretty close to being ready to come out of the oven. With our chiffon cake, we need it to stick to the edges. We are not going to grease the sides of our pan, only the bottom, okay? When you look up chiffon cake videos, and I've got one for us that we'll take a look at that's different than the one on our class page, you'll most often see them baked in like a bundt pan, one with a cone in the center. And the reason being is because it helps the stability of chiffon cake. Chiffon cake, very similar to our souffles, grows and climbs up the side of the pan because a chiffon cake has a meringue in it, just like our souffle. We're making a French meringue. So first step is sifting dry ingredients, including part of the sugar, into a mixing bowl. So looking at this recipe, you guys, they've already got the sugar divided for you. Here is the sugar, granulated sugar, that goes with your dry ingredients, the 200 grams. And then down here at the bottom, the 125 grams of granulated sugar is for your meringue, okay? So they have organized the ingredients for you in a pretty clear way. The sugar up top is what goes with your dry ingredients. Sugar down at the bottom is the sugar you'll use for your meringue. You're gonna sift together your dry ingredients, including that small portion of sugar, that 200 grams. Mix together, add your oils until the dries are moistened, add your egg yolks, water, and liquid flavorings. We're gonna set that aside. You wanna mix it until it's smooth. You don't need to incorporate a ton of air into it. You're going to clean out your mixer bowl, put it back on. You're gonna whip your egg whites, just like we've done for every meringue that we've had to make so far, until they form soft peaks. You're gonna add your cream of tartar and your sugar very slowly. So some of you have asked this, and I think most of you already know that acid can help stabilize meringue. So that's what the cream of tartar is, and that's what it's doing. Helps make that meringue a little stronger, which helps us fold it into our cake batter more easily without it deflating. It is the air inside of this meringue that causes our cake to rise and climb. When we mix a meringue properly, we build really strong proteins that wrap around all of the air that we've trapped inside. And when that air goes into a hot oven, it gently and slowly expands, and that's what causes our cake to rise up. If we overmix our meringue, which again, you guys will notice because it won't look like marshmallow fluff anymore, it will look really chunky, like whipped butter. If you overmix your meringue, the proteins aren't strong enough anymore. So then what happens in the oven, instead of those air bubbles gently expanding, they pop. So you wanna avoid overmixing your meringue, but I don't think you guys will overmix it. You guys have done plenty of meringue by this stage, so I'm really confident in your ability there. Once you've added your sugar and your cream of tartar and you've mixed to firm, moist peaks, you're good. The meringue's done, and you're gonna fold that gently into your base mixture that you mixed together previously. So really similar to our souffle, right? We're not making a roux, we're making like a base batter, and then we're folding our meringue into it. So that's the simplified version of your chiffon cake. So the thing about chiffon cake that I think you'll see a lot of is most people, especially in those cone pans, flip it upside down to cool it. So after it comes out of the oven, it should feel, before you take it out, press the top. Is it firm? Is it springy? Is it bouncing back? It should be. If you put a toothpick in, does the toothpick come out dry? It should be before you take it out of the oven. Remember that we do not want to grease the sides of our pan. Yes, it will be more difficult to remove the cake later, but we need the cake to stick to that pan to stay really nice and risen. What you will notice if you, let's say you didn't cool your cake upside down, you will see your cake deflate a bit. It is the nature of the product, just like our soufflés, just like our gluten-free chocolate cake. When the air of the meringue comes out of the hot oven, it gently is released. By turning our cakes upside down to cool, we're sort of fighting gravity, and the cake is staying stretched as opposed to deflate. If it's right side up, as opposed to gravity affecting it and it deflating if we tip it upside down and it's stuck to that pan, it's staying suspended as it cools. And then once it cools completely, it's not going to shrink anymore. If you have a pan that has little feet on it, that's what's most commonly used for chiffon. So when you flip it over, it's standing a couple inches above the countertop. I don't have a pan like that. I use regular cake pans for my chiffon cake. What I do is I make sure I don't overfill my pans. So maybe in week 1 with creaming method, I would have filled my pans really high and then just cut that layer in half. With chiffon method, I do smaller layers and I bake them individually. If the cake isn't mounding over my cake pan, I can flip that pan over on the cooling rack without a problem. But if the cake is mounding the pan, you're not going to be able to flip it upside down effectively. Does that make sense? Yes?
Yes, chef.
Anybody else? Gregory says yes. Willie says yes. Megan says yes. Okay. Paula says yes. So the other thing is I don't panic when my cake comes out of the oven. You do want to flip it upside down sooner rather than later, but you also don't want to move too quickly. If your cake is still scorching hot coming out of the oven, you don't just want to immediately flip right over. Your cake could crack, parts could fall out. So give it a minute or two after you've taken it out of the oven before you flip it upside down to cool, and then let it cool completely. Again, cool all the way to room temperature before you try and remove it. Something I like to do before I take my knife around the edge when it's finally time to remove my cake is I kind of beat the sides of my pan with my hand. Excuse me. I've had some people tease me about this. They're like, what are you doing, chef? That doesn't seem like it's making a difference. For me, I feel like it loosens the cake ever so slightly. So then when I take my knife around, I notice less texture. I get a smoother cut on the way around taking it out. So that's something to think about too. Willie says it will make the cake split at the top sometimes. That's true. Let's see here. So this week, you guys, same requirements as week 1, at least 2 layers, a minimum of 2 layers, okay? Frosting in between. Remember, our Swiss buttercream will be layered in between our layers of cake and coating the exterior of our cake, our crumb coat, and then your smooth coat of icing. Then your American buttercream will be used for buttercream flowers. I would love you guys, I'm not going to make it a requirement, but I would really, really love you guys to challenge yourselves to do a little lettering this week as well. So writing maybe Happy B-Day, or I love you, or Today Stinks, or whatever you want. I don't care. It can be silly. It can be, as long as it's appropriate, of course. But I encourage you guys to practice a little lettering on your cakes. If you do so, I encourage you to letter on your cake before you place your flowers on. Now I want to show you guys a video of one of my favorite cake decorators on YouTube. I mentioned before, I'm just going to keep saying it because I don't know when new people have popped in, and I want to remind us that I want to go through our class videos less because you guys have access to those on our class page. You guys are all strong students. I know that you are checking out the resources. So I want to give you even more resources here in class. That's really something I want to try and do. So I hope that that works for you guys. But if you ever have questions about our class videos, our resources on our class page, you know you can reach out to me about that anytime. All right. So have you guys ever heard of Man About Cake?
And sort of the peachy orange family. This is a fall cake, so we wanted to go.
This is him.
Yes, I love him. I love him all the time.
Yeah. He is super silly, super fun, super talented. His videos are usually about 10 to 15 minutes long, so not too long. I don't feel like I'm sitting there for an eternity trying to learn how to do something, but just long enough that I feel like he gets really detailed and gives really, really helpful tips. He makes crazy cakes sometimes, like really elaborate octopus cakes and crazy, and then sometimes he makes really beautiful, simple, small wedding cakes with flowers on them. This particular video is going to be a fall flower cake. So the first thing I want you to notice is he's got a little styrofoam block, and then he's got a nail tip stabbed into it. So you don't have to have a nail, but it will make your life a lot easier. And the nail is this little flat circle with the pointy stick coming out of the end. Even if you don't have a styrofoam block to stick it in, using that nail, you can hold the stick part of it and then with your other hand be piping your flour on the top. So I recommend purchasing one. You can definitely buy them individually, but you do not need it. So if you don't have one, don't panic. You can do your flowers on squares of parchment. You can do it on a small pan that you've set on your turntable. So there are absolutely other methods I did not have a flower nail for a really long time. I am one of those people that probably waits a little too long to invest in equipment. I think to myself, I could probably figure this out without that tool, but that's not true. I eventually had to just bite the bullet and get the tool. All right, now we're gonna watch this video, and I promise I'll stop interrupting.
We go fall colors, but I didn't want to go super, super bright orange. I have my little rose nail here and then something to hold it in case I have to put it down. So we're going to put a tiny bit of buttercream here and then a little piece of wax or parchment paper. This is so we can take them off, and then once we have them all made, put them in the freezer, or we can put them in the refrigerator so we can handle them later and get them on the cake really easily. So for the rose, I'm going to start with a bulb. Like so. Put that down, and now we'll put our rose tip on here. So the first thing we'll do is start with the bud, the center. You want to make sure that the skinny part of your tip is at the top and the fat part is at the bottom, because that's where the petal needs to be really thin at the top. So we're going to start piping.
I know I promised I'd stop interrupting, but he just said something so important, you guys. With that raindrop tip, that petal tip that I told you guys all about in week 1 that you're using, the fat part of the raindrop, the rounded part at the bottom, it goes on the base of your rose. The tops of your petals should be coming out of the skinny part of the raindrop, okay? So when you're piping, the fat part of the raindrop should be closest to the bottom of the flower, and the skinniest should be the tops of your petals, right? Because when you look at a flower, it's bulkier at the base, and those petals gently and delicately curl outward, right?
And do one whole turn. Like so. And now I'm just going to pipe petals, just with a curving motion up and back down.
If I didn't have one of those plastic things, could I use one of those things you put in the middle of a pizza?
No. No, yeah. Fancy tables? You're asking somebody who doesn't eat pizza. I have to follow this anti-inflammation diet because my skin is horrible and it revolts against me. But at least while I'm here, I get to eat cake. But then when I'm not here, I can't eat cake. Okay, so that's our first round. That could just be a flower on its own. I'm going to go one step further and make a little bit of a bigger one by doing another row of petals. By the way, if you're struggling with flowers, I have a friend, her name is Liz Shem. She has a great tutorial and lots of troubleshooting, which I think is what people need most. So we'll put the class in the description box, or you can click the eye up there. It's a great, great tutorial. All right, that looks pretty good to me. I could go even bigger, but I'm going to stop here. We're going to take it off and put it to the side. Rose. Now we're going to make another kind of rose. We're going to make an English rose. I'm going to do it in a different color, but I'm actually going to use the same tip. That way, when I start to pipe, it'll be this color, and then it'll change into another one. Because, you know, flowers vary. Some of them are solid colors, but some of them have variations. So let's go ahead and make our bulb. Let's squeeze hard. This is good buttercream flower buttercream. For the center, they have like these almost curly, ruffly centers. So what I'm going to do is pipe, and I'm going to go back and forth like this to kind of get that ruffled effect, and then we'll put the petals on after. That's the center. And then we'll do a row of petals. And then we'll finish with some larger petals. Like that. See, so now the center is a little bit darker.
We're gonna keep watching this, but I do want to bring in a couple of things. Oh, Clarissa says you're having a hard time hearing him.
Yeah, the audio is really like wah, 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 wah.
Okay. I'll see if I can make that better. But some of the important things that he just showed us. One, creating a center. So he both times put a little dollop, right, on his nail before he started piping petals. Then the next crucial step, you guys, you should not see that dollop in your final flower. So after you put your dollop, which is really just there to fill, to give you something to glue petals to. After you've made your dollop, he did that first initial spin, or the second time, the English rose, he did the little ruffles in the center, but he covered the dollop of icing, and then to grab a hold of, then he started creating his petals. So when it comes to petals, you guys, I want you to definitely be creative and you know, free flowing, but also you can think about, for those of you who like a little bit more clear direction, when I make a rose, if I'm just trying to show someone else how to make a rose, I make my bud, I do my spiral around that bud so it looks nice and covered like the interior of a rose, and then I do 3 petals, and then I do 5 petals, and then I do 7 petals. So just a small increase, 2 more petals per row, but it really gives me a pretty even, beautifully open, normal looking rose. So that's something that you guys can aim for. Sometimes I'll do less, like sometimes I'll do 3 petals and then 5 petals. I really never do just 3 because that's going to be a really wimpy flower. Probably won't even quite look like a flower yet with only 3 petals, so definitely at least 5, but I recommend 7, 3, 5, 7 to have a really full, beautiful looking flower. Again, you can do a little less than that. You can do more than that. Christina says, do you just have to do roses? No, you can choose, I need to see at least 1 rose. As long as I see 1 rose, I'll be satisfied. The rest of the flowers you can choose yourself. No Russian piping tips. If you guys choose other flowers, they need to be flowers where you are individually piping the petals. There are a huge variety of flowers where you individually pipe the petals. There are so many useful YouTube videos about it, from Wilton, from King Arthur, so many different chefs, home chefs, professional chefs. There are really a ton of awesome buttercream flower resources out there for you guys. Kathleen, you've got a question?
Hey, Chef. Did you by chance catch the name of that lady she mentioned for the troubleshoot tutorials?
Yep, I'll post it right here. I'll post it in our chat.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yep. There we go. Okay, let's keep watching a little bit more. Any questions so far about the making of your rose, your buttercream flower? So
would you mind just putting a link to that video in the chat?
Sure.
So that I can watch it later.
Absolutely. All right, let's see here. Let me get this up. Okay. It's called a flower nail, Gregory. There's that link. Right, so let's keep watching this video. You guys are feeling good though? I know I've been blasting through, powering through today. Shannon's smiling, so I think we're okay. All right, let's keep watching a little bit more here.
And only piped around. Dosed. Now, we're going to do a peony or peony. How do you say peony or peony? You guys comment below. All right, so I've got my bulb, and now I'm going to start piping our petals. These petals are different because you want them to lay flat. So what I'm going to do is pipe over the bulb and keep them as flat as possible to the bulb. And when I come up to the top here, I'm squeezing with a little more pressure. This is going to keep it really nice and bulbous. So if you find that you're losing a little bit of the bulby shape, you can actually take a little spatula and kind of run it along here and clean up these edges, because really all you want to see is this top part anyways, to keep it nice and bulbousy. Little trick there. That's a troubleshoot. So I'm going to do even more. So that can be a painting right there, but I'm going to open up a little bit more. So now we'll do our large petals. Those will be opened a little bit more. If you wiggle the tip a little bit, you get sort of this variation in texture. It looks nice. Now I'm going to make a bunch of these and get them in the cooler. All right, let's break down our red velvet cake.
I'm fast forwarding to him transferring the flowers to his buttercream cake. So his flowers he stuck in the freezer, so they're really, really firm, and he can handle them with his fingers a little bit without affecting them too much. I have very, very hot hands. My hands are always like 1,000 trillion degrees. So I probably wouldn't try handling my buttercream flowers with my hands because I think I would just melt them so quickly. I use scissors. I use shears to take my flower off the nail, and then I use those scissors. I carefully transfer the flower to the cake, and I maybe just use my finger to sort of nudge the flower off my scissors. But you guys can experiment whatever technique is easiest for you when it comes to getting it from the parchment, this sleeve of parchment, to your cake. You can see that he piped buttercream underneath. He's going to cover that with more flowers, but you do need something. If your buttercream is cold on both your cake and your flowers, you'll need something to act as some sort of a glue, just a little bit. Let's see here. Just ordered a set of flower nails. Awesome. Okay.
Our fall buttercream flower.
Beautiful, right? He's got lots of different types of flowers on there. He's got lots of different sizes. I encourage you guys to do that as well. Definitely experiment with different sizes, experiment with variety of flowers. You guys can have more fun with colors this week. I know in week 1 I really wanted you to stick to white, but feel free to color your flowers. I would say try and stick to more natural colors. You know, if I were to see a cake with lime green and hot pink flowers, I'm not going to see the flowers as much as I would if they were a realistic color. And by that I mean, like, if I saw a pink flower like on this cake, it resembles a real flower because flowers can actually be that color. But if you choose a color that is not found in nature, I think it's harder to get the customer to see your flowers the way that you want them to. So if you choose to go the color route, which you also don't have to, you can have a totally white cake with totally white flowers. Just try and choose slightly more natural colors that you find in nature. At least 1 rose on your cake, at least 3 total flowers, okay? So 3 total flowers, at least 1 of them has to be a rose. They should be flowers where you are individually piping the petals. So again, no Russian tip where you're just plopping it down and pulling it back up and you've got something that looks like a flower, right? That can be useful in a lot of different ways, but not here. So in the beginning of class, I mentioned that buttercream flowers and gum paste flowers can add $signs to your product, and oh boy, can they. I charge by the flower, you guys, especially with gum paste. Holy guacamole. Gum paste is expensive, and as we will start to learn next week, it is incredibly labor intensive. It takes so much time to create realistic and delicate gum paste flowers. It can take weeks. Buttercream flowers certainly do not take nearly as much time, so I don't charge as much for them, but they do take time, attention, care, and detail, so I still charge by the flower when I'm making cakes. Your week 1 cake, if it was a 6-inch cake, flat coated in white icing with just a shell border on it and nothing else, I would probably charge one of my customers something like $40 for a cake like that. If I added 5 buttercream flowers to it, $65, easy. Boom, by adding 5 buttercream flowers, I just added $15 to that cost of the cake. The customer sees it. It's easier for the customer to accept that up in price, because it's not like we're saying, hey, I used an expensive ingredient. I know you can't see it, but that's why this cake is more expensive. We're saying, hey, look at these pretty extra flowers on top. That's why you have an added cost. And people are like, okay, yeah, I can see why there's an added cost, and typically they don't argue that. So buttercream flowers and gun paste flowers, you guys, I'm telling you, is something that just can take a cake from making you enough money to making you really good money. So just like our borders, it's going to take practice. You're going to have a couple flowers that you're like, this is not cute, and that's okay. Have a little bit, you guys will have plenty of frosting, so you don't need to worry about that. You can, the American buttercream recipe, even if you have it, you should still have plenty of frosting to work on your flowers. Make sure that you save a little bit for the leaves. I don't know if you guys noticed him do that last step on his cake, but anywhere there was a gap between flowers, he filled in with a little bit of green frosting to create leaves. I think those leaves are what really finishes it off. Just like I talked about how a mirror glaze can be just like a beautiful finishing touch. Same goes for the leaves and those flowers. It's the thing that I think really pushes them over from being something that you maybe could have found at like the store. I know Wilton sells like corn flowers now. They're like they have a styrofoam consistency. They look pretty, and I can see them being used on a cake, but they just don't look as nearly as realistic or nearly as detailed. And leaves are super easy, you guys. You can use the same petal tip to create your leaves. It's all about pressing more at first, creating a wider base, and then pulling up so that it thins up like a teardrop at the top. Practice on the sheet pan a few times before doing it on your cake. Kathleen says, how much would you charge for the flowers like the video you just showed? Oh, a cake like that is a cake like this, you guys, is super expensive. Now remember, there's not a universal price sheet because he used, I don't know what ingredients he used. I don't know how many hours this cake took him total. So what you guys should think about too with pricing, remember, going back to your baker's math, is your 30-30-30. 30% of the cost is ingredients, right? 30% of the cost is labor. What's the last 30%? Oh, everybody's muted.
Profit.
So make sure that whenever you guys are pricing out your cake, you're referring back to that sort of baker's math guideline. But a cake like this, man, this would feed like probably close to 100 people, maybe a little more, give or take, if sliced correctly. Looks like he's got some fondant decor wrapped around the borders. He's got a huge layer of buttercream. This cake, $350, somewhere ballpark for a cake like that.
I said about $250.
And it also depends on where you live. I live in a place where we don't have fancy bakeries and fancy restaurants. So every cake the people here have ever had is from Albertsons or the grocery store. So when I tell someone a cake is going to be $300, they're like, you're crazy, get out of town. So part of it is where you live too, and having to adjust, you know, not cutting yourself short. I don't want you guys to be giving things away for nothing when you worked really hard on it, but it does require finding a balance until you've really established yourself within your community. The more you establish yourself and the more your business grows, the more you'll be able to sort of bump those prices up a little bit more and more and more. Let's see if I have any other questions down here in the chat. Willie says, that's my problem. Me too, Willie. I sympathize with people. So something that I often do, something that's helped me not give away too much for too little, is to ask people what their budget is and then explain to them what I can do within that budget. So instead of someone coming to me and saying, you know, I want a 3-tiered stacked cake to feed 150 people and I want it covered in fondant and my budget is $60. I say, okay, well, we're not going to be able to do that, but here is what I can do for $60. And a lot of the times my customers are really surprised about what I'm still able to do within their budget, even if it means getting a little creative. So yeah, that's something that you can handle professionally and calmly, and make sure that you don't get taken advantage of in situations like that. That's a really great way to do it, is to ask them what their budget is, and then to describe to them what the things are that you can do within that budget. Because like I said, something else, you guys, that's really interesting about cookies in particular, cakes too, but on Instagram these days, there's tons of videos, right, of people decorating cookies, and they're those sped up videos, those time-lapse videos. So people are watching other cookie decorators decorate a cookie in what feels like 1 minute and 30 seconds because the video has been sped up. When in reality, it probably took 8.5 minutes to ice that cookie the way that they did, you know? So I think that people who aren't in the kitchen, who aren't doing it, truly have no idea the amount of time it takes, what goes into it, the equipment. So yeah, honesty with your customers and empathy with your customers will help a lot of business continue, you know? Even if somebody is like, whoa, that lady's prices are crazy. If you explain to them, well, yeah, maybe for my 3-tiered fondant cake with gun paste flowers, I'm not going to be able to do that for $60. But maybe we can do these fun cupcakes with an American buttercream, and I make little fondant statues for them all, or something like that. You know, there's room to be flexible for both your customer and you. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of communicating. We've talked about so much, you guys. We're done. I'm not going to hold you late today. Does anybody have any last minute questions for me before we head out the door?
I did, Chef.
Sure.
My question was based on last week's the mousse, and I screwed up because I had chunks of chocolate in my mousse the first time, and then stupid me was like, oh, I can get rid of those chunks by re-whipping it. Big, huge mistake. The whole fat separated and it curdled, and I threw it all away. I was like, well, lessons learned on that one. So then my second batch, I still got small particles of chocolate. Bless you.
Thank you.
So how making it again?
Yep.
And I knew my temperatures were both the same. I felt the eggs, I felt the chocolate, and they were both the same. And when it came time to mix it all, I still had little pieces of chocolate.
So you might not have been here in the beginning, but I am going to send you guys all an invitation to a bonus session on Friday about about just the chocolate mousse, so we can dive into it. But briefly, to answer your question, I think the thing that I saw most often was people adding chocolate to their egg mixture to their chocolate in too large of increments. So what I want you to try, if you had difficulty, next time, flip-flop, instead of adding your eggs to your chocolate, add your chocolate to your eggs, and do it in small increments, no larger than in thirds. I do it in even way smaller increments than that. Just like when I'm tempering my eggs with scalded milk, I start really slow, really small amounts. And then as they come together, I get a little more brave with how much I am pouring in. But so adding chocolate to your eggs this time around instead of eggs to chocolate, and making sure you are adding in very small increments, just like a sacrifice after sacrifice after sacrifice. If we add too much at one time, that's when it's going to seize up. So hopefully that helps. But again, I'm going to send you guys all an invite to a Friday bonus session, which I'll record. So if you can't make it, don't worry. I'll still post it on the class page just like an archive, and you can check it out at your earliest convenience.
Do you have the time yet, Chef?
I don't, but I'll send it in a message before the end of the day.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, you guys, thank you so much for a great session. I blabbed my ears off. Next week, I'm going to bring Jeopardy. We're going to do some review about the techniques, some of the things we've learned. Please, please, please do not forget your discussion forum. You've got a knowledge check, I believe a conversion check, and a discussion forum. Okay, so you can retake those knowledge checks as many times before the deadline closes. Discussion forum, initial post 8 points, peer replies 1 point each. Okay, I can't wait to see your cakes and your flowers, you guys.
Bye, Chef.
Have a great rest of your day.